And just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I originally started as a pastry chef with the Ritz Carlton, actually here in uptown Charlotte, and that's kind of how I got my start. So I know all the tips and tricks to what we're going to make today, American Buttercream. So we're going to go over a few of our ingredients of what it is that we're going to be using today. So we have some powdered sugar, a little bit of heavy cream, of course, some butter, and then I would definitely recommend using unsalted butter. If you have salted butter, it's okay. And if you have a stand mixer, this is going to be the best option. But of course, if you have the regular handheld one, that's fine as well. Or if we're really going old school and we're just using a whisk, we can do that too. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first thing when making any type of buttercream is making sure that our butter is nice and soft. So you can pull your butter out and let it come up to room temperature, or if you're pulling it straight from the refrigerator, you can always put it in the microwave for about 20 seconds to make it a little bit soft. So we're going to start off with our butter. We're going to add that into the bowl of our stand mixer. Okay, so you want to make sure that all of your butter is down in the bottom of the bowl, nothing's on the side, so that way everything gets mixed nicely. And we're just giving it a little bit of a head start to kind of get things nicely distributed and nice and soft. Then we're going to go with our powdered sugar. So when we're measuring our powdered sugar, it's going to be about 5 cups. And when you're measuring, you want to make sure that you have nice level scoops. So we're going to go in for a nice big scoop, and we're going to take a butter knife and kind of pat it down, make sure it's nice and even. And then we're going to swipe right across. And that's how you want to make sure you measure out your powdered sugar, nice and even. We left a big hump, then it wouldn't be exactly a cup, it'll be a little bit extra. So we're going to go ahead and add this into our mixer. Making sure it's all inside the bowl, nothing's inside.
And Stanley, I'm going to ask a question. Do you recommend that they sift powdered sugar, or is it okay not to sift it?
So I would definitely sift your powdered sugar if you find that it has some clumps in it, and you'll be able to notice very quickly. What happens is if there's any moisture that's able to get into the bag, it causes it to clump. But if your powdered sugar was packed nice and airtight and it's very loose, you don't see any hard chunks in it, then you're fine to just add it straight into the mixer. All right, so we want to make sure we start off on low, so that way powdered sugar does not poof up into our face, so nice low speed. And as it starts to incorporate, you can always increase the speed just a little bit. The last ingredient for our buttercream is our heavy cream. And we're going to just slowly add this into our powdered sugar and butter as it mixes together. And what is going to happen with the heavy cream is it gives it a little bit of a more silky texture, adds a little bit more fat into our frosting, and that's really going to help with making it nice and smooth. Okay. We're going to increase the speed just a little bit, and we're going to let our frosting start to mix together and fully incorporate. So today we're just going to do a regular traditional vanilla buttercream. This is a time where you would go in and add in your flavorings. So if you want to make a chocolate buttercream, you can add in some melted chocolate or maybe some cocoa powder, or you can add different extracts. Extracts are just condensed flavorings. You can do vanilla, orange, hazelnut, whatever kind you feel like you want to have to complement your cupcake. All right, so it's looking nice and smooth. You want to make sure that there's no solid butter chunks, no big pieces of powdered sugar. And once everything is nicely incorporated, we can go ahead and turn our mixer off and lift it up.
So do we have vanilla extract in our buttercream?
For our vanilla buttercream, I'm going to hold off on the vanilla.
Right.
Because when we get ready to add the colors in, a lot of times the extracts that are a little bit darker in color, like vanilla, can affect the color just a little bit. So if you're going to just do a regular white buttercream without adding any color in it, then I would go ahead and add in your flavorings. If you're going to be coloring them and doing multiple colors, then I would keep the flavoring out just so it doesn't interact with those colors that you're trying to get.
Great tip.
All right, so we're going to twist off our paddle attachment. And you want to make sure we scrape off all of the frosting off of our attachment. So we're going to use that for our lovely cupcakes.
Definitely don't want to miss any of that good stuff.
Now, all right, so now we are going to divide our frosting and we're going to color it. So a nice, even texture, very soft. It should not have any chunks inside. So very, very smooth.
Very nice.
And here comes the fun part. This is where we have to decide what colors we're going to use. So I'm also going to show you how to swirl colors together. And usually when you're swirling colors together, you don't want to do any more than about 3 or 4. So we're just going to color 3 colors today. And we're going to include white as one of our colors. So we're going to grab 2 separate bowls. And we're going to divide out our frosting into the different colors we like. I'm going to have 1 bowl. And we're going to color some blue frosting. We're going to keep some white, which we'll leave in our mixing bowl. And then we'll take out some for our 3rd color, which is going to be red. If you're catching on, we're doing flower power colors today. Alrighty. So we have our 3 bowls of frosting divided. Now we can move on to coloring. So let's talk about colors a little bit. So when you go to the store to purchase your colors, they come in 2 different varieties. You have your gel colors, which is what we're going to use today. These have a very, very low moisture content, which is going to make sure that our buttercream frosting doesn't get too loose. You can use liquid coloring, but you don't want to use as much because it's going to thin out your buttercream a little bit and make it a little too soft. So you just want to make sure that whichever one you are using, you don't use too much, so that way your buttercream stays the same consistency. Now with your colors, you don't need a ton of color. The more color you add, the deeper the color is going to be. So we're going to go for a pretty light sky blue. And then for our red, we're going to add a little bit more so that we get a little bit of a darker color.
So Danny, so I've noticed that you aren't using the liquid food coloring, Stanley. So why do you use the gel instead of the liquid?
So the gel is going to be a little bit easier to color in our frosting. It's not going to make the frosting as loose.
Mm-hmm. Can you use the liquid though?
You can use the liquid. There's nothing wrong with using the liquid. You just want to make sure you don't use too much of it, so that way your frosting doesn't thin out too much. All right, good. Hand wash. And we are ready to color. Thank you. So for your buttercream, you want to make sure that you don't leave any streaks behind. So we're going to make sure it gets nice and colored done. And if you're mixing your color and you see that you want it to be a little bit darker or the color is not as deep as you would like, you can always go in and add a little bit more. But remember, once you add color in, you can't take it out. So you want to be pretty confident in how much color you add into your frosting. Okay, so we're gonna go a little bit deeper. So see how we still have some streaks, still a little light in color. I want it a little bit darker. So we're gonna add in a little bit more blue color. And we're gonna give it a nice good mix to make sure we don't have any of those streaks. There we go, that's looking great. Kind of matches my shirt a little bit.
It does. I was thinking the same thing. You did that on purpose.
Yeah, after a while, once you've done this for quite some time, you kind of get really good at determining color shades.
And how much did you think you put in there? Maybe 3 little squirts?
Yeah, probably about 3 dots, so maybe about a teaspoon of the blue. And of course, the more frosting you have the color, the more dye you're going to need to use.
Will that affect the taste though, if it's an even deeper color?
That's a good question, yes. So with some colors, more of your darker colors, the more you add, it gets a little bit of an aftertaste to it. More of your lighter colors like your pink and your yellows that don't require as much food coloring, you're not going to taste any of the after effects of the colors. But definitely your reds, your blue, your purple, especially black, those intense colors are going to leave a little bit of an aftertaste behind. Okay, and now for our red. Now when you're coloring red, if you ever want to make pink, you don't necessarily need to buy pink dye. You can buy red and just add a very small amount, and you will get pink. Or you can add a lot more, and we'll get a nice red color. So we're going to add a little bit more food coloring to our pink. It's always handy to keep some toothpicks by if you have the containers of food coloring versus the squeeze bottles. Alrighty. Nice. So again, we want to make sure we don't have any of those streaks. Give it a nice good mix. And whenever you think the color is a good shade for what you would like, you can stop adding your color.
It does take a lot to get to red, I think.
It does. And if you find as you're going through and you're like, oh, well, I really like this shade, I'm fine with it, then you can always add as little or as much color as you like. Alrighty. So we went from a light pink to more of like a hot pink. We can add more red color to make it even a darker color and get that intense red. But for our color, I'm gonna leave it this color because I think having this color is gonna look really good with our cake stand when we get ready to decorate our cupcakes. Alrighty. So now we have our 3 colors of frosting. We have our blue, our now hot pink, and our white.
Very nice.
Alrighty, so now when we get ready to start working with our buttercream, you want to make sure that for your cupcakes, we're going to be using piping bags. So piping bags come in many different sizes. When you go to the store, you want to make sure that you get ones that are big enough for the project that you're doing. I recommend getting about the 12 or 16-inch ones for doing cupcakes for smaller projects. If you're going to be decorating a larger cake, you may want to go a little bit bigger because that's going to determine how much frosting you use inside of your piping bag. You also want to make sure that you identify which kind of tips you want to use. There's many, many different kinds, many different shapes and sizes, and they're all going to be based on what it is you want to use them for. So we're going to go over it and kind of talk about some of these tips. So the larger tips, these are a part of the 800 series. They kind of go by numbers. And the 800 series tips are used for large projects or for cupcakes. So I'm going to show you the swirl patterns for cupcakes, and we're going to use this French star tip, or we're going to use the open circle tip for our cupcakes. So that's the large 800 series. Then our smaller tips, little mini tips, so cute. These are going to be for your smaller projects. So any fine decorations, if you're going to be adding any decorations to your cupcakes or to your larger cakes, you're going to want to use the smaller ones. And these come in all different varieties as well. So we have another star tip, another open circle tip, and then we also have a few specialty ones. We have one that's used for making leaves that we're going to use as accents to our roses, a rose tip to make our roses, and then this ruffle tip has two sides. It has a flat side, and then it has a ruffle side for making ruffle patterns. And we're going to show you how to do that for some borders. Okay, so once you've decided what kind of tips you're going to use, you want to make sure you get them all lined up. So you have them ready for you. You have your piping bag, and now we're ready to start. So we're filling our piping bag. To make sure that our piping bag stays nice and clean, it's really going to help you when you get ready to start decorating. We're going to fold down the top edge of our piping bag and kind of open it up. And this is going to help us get all of our frosting in and keep our bag nice and neat, because after we put our frosting in, we're going to pull the sides up, and all of our buttercream be on the inside, and our bag will be nice and clean. So I'm going to fold it back down, open it up. And to help with stability, to make sure that you are not getting frosting all on the sides, we're going to use our little handy dandy assistant. We're going to use the cup. So if you have a mason jar, this is probably going to be the best option, because it's a little bit wider than your standard cup. So it fits in very, very nicely. If you have just a regular 8-ounce or 12-ounce cup, those work well as too. And we're just going to put our piping bag inside, and this just acts as a holder for us to be able to hold our piping bag. So we're going to take some of our frosting and put it inside of our piping bag. But before we can do that, can't forget about our tips. So a lot of times what happens is people get so excited and they're like, it's time to start decorating. And they forget to put their tip in. And they get ready to fold it up, and they're like, all right, my frosting's inside, I'm ready to go. They fold it up, and then they notice there's no tip inside. So make sure you don't forget. Your tip goes in first. So we're going to do our large open circle tip right inside of our piping bag. And then we put our frosting in. Now I know what you're thinking, how's the frosting going to come out? Don't rush, we're going to get to it. So we're going to start with the blue, because blue is one of my favorite colors. And we're going to put our frosting right inside our piping bag. And you want to make sure that you don't overfill your piping bag. It's very, very important not to do that. Because what's going to happen is if we overfill it, when we get ready to fold it up, you see how nicely all of our frosting fits inside of our piping bag? We overfilled it, and it will be coming all out the side, and we don't want that. So we want a nice clean bag. We're going to push our frosting inward and kind of slide it down of our piping bag. And to make sure that none of our frosting comes out on the other side, we're going to tie off our bag. And there's two ways you can do that. You can take the excess of your bag and you can just tie it into a knot, or you can take a very user-friendly piping bag tie. Now, piping bag ties are very, very great to use, especially when you have multiple piping bags and multiple colors that you're using. And they're just these little rubber bands. And you get so many in a pack that you never have to worry about needing these ever again. Okay. So they're just a little rubber band, very elastic, for them to be able to stretch. And it comes with this little hook at the end. So when you get ready to put your rubber band on, you take your rubber band and you stretch it across your piping bag, and the hook goes on the other end of the rubber band, and it keeps it from untying, just like that.
Which one do you like to do?
I actually like the rubber bands for the smaller bags because they're hard to tie.
Yeah.
And the larger bags, I just like to just tie it off because there's so much extra anyway.
Right.
All right, so our piping bag is all loaded and ready to go. So what I usually recommend if you're going to be doing a project with many different colors, go ahead and get all of your piping bags set up. And then, so when you're ready to use them, you can just easily change off and move to the next one. So for our tip, we did not cut a hole in order to get our frosting out. But the reason why I want you to wait and cut it after your piping bag is made is a lot of times people cut the hole too big and then the piping tip slides right on out. And you're like, oh, well, I guess I cut the hole too big. So if you take your scissors and you score right around the piping tip, it's going to be the perfect opening for your piping bag. So you never have to worry about your piping tip falling out. Cool trick, right?
That's a cool trick. I
I'll tell you how many times I've had the piping tip just fall out and I'm like, it has to be around. All right, so for your cupcakes. So we have 4 different cupcakes. I'm going to show you 4 different designs. With the open circle tip, what you would normally do with this one is just a regular swirl pattern on top of your cupcake. So using a clockwise rotating motion with our hand, we're going to push on our piping bag for the frosting to come out. And using our other hand, we're going to guide our piping bag just in a clockwise motion. And then when we get back at 12 o'clock, we're going to let the frosting pile up on top of that second layer, and we're going to meet it right in the middle. Now, once you get ready to end the frosting on your cupcake, you want to stop pushing on the bag, and we're going to rotate to twist it off. And that prevents us from having that little peak at the top of our cupcake. So that's the swirl pattern. Now, the swirl pattern for cupcakes can be done with an open circle tip. It can be done with the star tip. It can almost be done with any one. So we're just going to determine what kind of pattern you want. So now let's do one with our second tip. So again, have our piping bag and our mason jar to hold our piping bag for us. We have our tip. We're going to slide it straight on in. And then grab some of our frosting. Into our piping bag it goes. And then pull our piping bag up. Nice and clean. Pull our frosting down. And now we're ready to tie it off with one of our ties. Around our piping bag. And then hook it at the end. And color number 2 is ready to go. Take our scissors for the perfect score right around our piping tip. And now we're ready. Now, once you start to have all of your colors kind of lined up and that you're going to be using, you can always use your cups to hold your piping bags. So that way you can just use them as you go along. And same thing with our star tip, same motion. We're going to hold the piping bag in our dominant hand, guide with our opposite hand, and then starting in that clockwise motion, pushing down, and then once we get back around, building right on top of that first layer. Once we come to an end, we stop pushing, swirl off, and look how cute that is.
They're pretty.
Beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Okay, 2 piping techniques down, 2 more to go. So now what we're going to do is a very special kind of cupcake, our flower cupcake. Now this one takes a little bit of practice, but I'm sure you'll get it down. So we're going to be switching to our smaller tip, and this is called a rose tip. It looks almost like a little teardrop, and we're going to fill it in our piping bag same way, but you want to make sure you decide what color you want your flower to be. Do you want a white flower, a blue one, or do you want a white flower? Any one is perfectly fine, or you can always do a combination of the 3. Now, speaking of combination of the 3, how do we get 3 different colors for one piping bag? Great question. So the way we do that is we're going to do a swirl pattern with our frosting. We want to put all 3 colors in the piping bag so that when it comes out in a swirl pattern. Now, the way we're going to do that is we're going to take a piece of plastic wrap, and we're going to lay our plastic wrap right onto a cutting board or a plate, just to give you a little bit of stability. And what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 different lines of our colors, and we're going to roll them together. So that way all of our colors are swirled, and then we'll put it into our piping bag. So we have nice, clean swirls as we go through. So we're going to take some of our pink. And we're going to put some of our pink on our plastic wrap. It doesn't need to be in a perfect line because we're going to swirl them together, but you just want to make sure that when you're putting them on, that they're just right next to each other.
Do you need a knife or anything to help with that, or is it okay?
Oh, this is good. You can use a butter knife. That works very well as well. So just making sure they're nice and next to each other.
Just in case you need it.
Just like that. And then can't forget about our white. So we'll go in with our white right next to our blue. All right. So we have our 3 colors all right next to each other. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take our plastic wrap and we're just going to roll them together.
The sushi roll technique.
Nice. So you can see that we have our 3 colors all right next to each other, nice and swirled. So when we get ready to add it into our piping bag and we press on our piping bag, all 3 colors will come out together. It's going to look really cool. So we're going to take them, make sure they're rolled nicely together, twist to 2 sides. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut a nice even opening at the end of our piping bag. And this just makes sure that all of our colors come out nice and even. Okay. Then we're ready for a new piping bag. Now with the swirl technique, You may find that you may want a bigger piping bag. Again, it's all about how much you add into your piping bag. If you're going to be, if you're going to need to add a lot more, you're going with a bigger size. If you're doing smaller projects, then the regular size is great. Guys, we'd almost forget our piping tip. Okay, piping tip inside. Now with the smaller ones, you want to make sure you really get them all the way down to the end, so that way your frosting is not on the outside. Now the only difference with our little swirl one is that we're just going to pop our frosting right inside. We don't have to worry about trying to use the spatula to fill it. And just like that. So same thing, we want to push on our frosting to start getting it towards the bottom, and we want to tie off our piping bag. So we're going to take another tie. It's great that they put so many in one pack. And meet it at the end. And perfect. And now for the perfect score right around our piping tip. And perfect, we are good to go. Now, usually with the swirl frostings, you want to give it a little bit of a head start to make sure all the colors are coming out nicely. So just right on your cutting board, you just give a little press, make sure all of your colors are coming out, and you are ready to start. So you can see when I first started, it was kind of just blue, and then the pink started coming, and now the white's coming through, and now towards the end you can see the pink, the blue, and the white. So that's where you want to make sure you start, where you can see all three colors. Now for the rose for our cupcake, we're going to start this in 2 different steps. So the very center of our rose is our rosebud. So the way we start that is just creating a little bit of a dollop on the inside of our cupcake. And it doesn't need to be perfect, just a little mound, because that's going to be the very center of our rose. And then we're going to start creating the petals. Now, flowers are always done in odd numbers. So we're going to start with 3. So our rosebud is technically our 1. Now we're going to start with 3 petals and then move up to 5. For each petal, you're going to want to use a up and down motion, almost like you're making a rainbow. So we're going to start and go up the rainbow and down. And that's 1 petal. So we have 2 more to go for this layer. So we're going to start right next to the other one, go up the rainbow and down. And then for our last one, up the rainbow and down to make that first layer of flowers. Now, of course, you could stop here and just make a little tiny rose. But we're going to go a little bit bigger. So we started with 1, our little mound, 3. We're going to continue in odd numbers and then move on to 5. So up the rainbow and down 5 times. Making sure that we rotate to get our petals all the way around our rose. Just like that. Now we have 2 layers to our flower. Now you can go again and we can do 7, staying with odd numbers. And you can make your flower as big as you would like.
So pretty with the different colors.
Yeah, and usually the more petals you add, the better your flower looks. So if you ever are making your flower, you're like, oh, my flower doesn't look all that great. Try adding some more petals. It gives it a nice full look. And then you're like, wow, that really looks like a flower. It looks good. And you can see all the different swirls. Now, what's cool about doing swirls with a rose is that it looks different from almost every single angle because of the swirl pattern. So as you rotate it, you see different waves of colors as you go through. It looks really nice.
Very pretty.
Perfect.
Nice.
Now, for your rose flower, you can also add little accents. You can also make some leaves. So we do have a leaf tip, and it looks a little bit like a little bird's beak. So our leaf tip, of course, you can color some green and you can do some leaves, but with food, you can make leaves any color. So we're going to do some white ones, and that's going to look really, really nice with our swirl pattern of our flower. So we're going to grab another piping bag. We're going to follow all of those same tips that we did before. Let's fold our piping bag down. I'm going to open it up. Put our tip inside. Slide our tip down. We're going to use our cup to hold our piping bag for us very nicely. And go ahead and add in some of our white buttercream. Perfect. All right, and pull our piping bag up. Slide our frosting down. And once again, with our perfect score, our piping bag. Perfect. Grab us another time. And we are all set. Now, when you're getting ready to do your leaves, you want to make sure that your bird beak has the pointy edge facing up. So there's two sides. There's the opening where the metal isn't, and then it facing up where the little peak is. So you want to make sure it's facing up when you get ready to do your piping. Now the leaves are very, very fun to do because they're very, very easy. We're going to go to where we want to put our leaf, and we're just going to press down. And once we have our leaf the size that we want it to be, we just pull straight up. So push down, lift straight up. Pull down and straight up. Now we have little leaves for our flower.
So pretty.
And again, we always want to do things in odd numbers. So I recommend doing 3 sections of leaves in little clumps of 3. And now you go, your perfect rose cupcake.
Very pretty. Stanley, when you've worked with buttercream frosting, do you usually put it in the refrigerator at any point while you're working with it, or is it fine for it to get, yes?
So there's so many different types of buttercream that you can make, but all buttercreams have butter in them. And butter, as it starts to rise in temperature, setting out, the warmth of your hands, if the room is really hot, it starts to soften, and that's going to make your frosting soft. So if you find that your frosting is getting a little loose, or it's very warm in the room, you want to keep your frosting in the refrigerator, and you can pull it out periodically as you get ready to use it. But for smaller projects, you're pretty good. It's usually for really big projects when you're decorating a whole cake or several cupcakes at one time, where you may need to put your frosting in the refrigerator. Now for our last cupcake, we're just going to do something a little fun. So just like with art, because food is art, you can make a collage of different types of piping. So the way that we do that is you always want to start off with some kind of focal point. So we're going to actually use our star tip as our focal point for this cupcake with just a little dollop. And then we can go around it and we can add little accents to it. So we can add a little patch of leaves. In one section. And then maybe go through and do some polka dots. And then what you can also do with your rose tip is you can do ruffles. Now, the way we do ruffles is just with that constant pressure, just moving our packet bag back and forth, just in like a ruffle motion. And you can make little ruffles for your cupcake.
It's like ribbon candy.
Yeah, so you can do a little collage of different piping on your cupcake. And that really gives your cupcakes a little character, something a little interesting. And no one will ever be able to say they've ever seen a cupcake like that.
I like that. Very nice.
Alrighty, now I'm going to move a little bit of these frostings out of the way for us. And we're going to look at some piping tips for some large cakes. So if you're going to be doing any cakes at home, you can always do some really fun decorations for your larger cakes. So you can do some borders on the bottom, on the top edge. You can always do flowers like we did on our cupcakes on top of the whole cake. But when we get ready to do your borders around the bottom base and on the top edge, you kind of want to get an idea of what kind of border you want to do. So there are several different kinds, and a great way to practice and kind of get an idea of which one you want to do is to do a little border template. So this is one that we've created here at Flower Power, where there's 4 different popular border tips, and you can use this template to kind of practice. So we have a straight line, a ruffle, a shell border, and then an open circle shell border. And you can practice them, and these are all different types of borders you can use in your cake. Now, the same way you would use your piping bag for your cupcakes is the same way that you would use them for your borders, with a little bit of an alteration. So when you are holding your piping bag to do your borders, you want to make sure that you're nice and flat against the cake. So for our, we just want to follow the pattern on our template. So it's just like our rose. It's a little bit of a down and up. So we're going to go down with our piping bag.
Can you hit it?
To make our ruffle. And now for our straight line, which is even easier, we're going to hold our piping bag right against our cake and just go straight across.
And are you squeezing it really hard when you have to do it like that?
So it's, you want to make sure you have a firm pressure, but that it's nice and consistent. Because the harder you push, the more frosting that's going to come out at one time. And you don't want your frosting to kind of pile up. I can show you what that looks like. So if you're moving kind of slow with your frosting, but you're pushing really fast, then your frosting is going to start to bunch up. You want to make sure you have a nice consistent pressure with the same movement across. So that way it's nice and flat. So you can kind of see the difference. You have here where I was pushing really hard in the piping bag, but I wasn't moving fast enough, so it kind of bunched up. But then as I loosened my pressure and had a nice consistent movement, it flattened out very nicely. Now for our shell border, we're going to switch to a star tip that's a little bit smaller.
Which tip did you use for the swirly ones again?
For the ruffles,
Mm-hmm.
The ruffles we use our rose tip.
Oh, great.
Yep, and we just left it nice and flat against the cake, so that way it gives a nice ruffle effect. Now for our shell border, we're going to use the same tip that we did for our cupcakes, but it's just a little bit smaller. So the larger one is going to be for the swirl pattern on cupcakes. The smaller one, because we want to do finer details, is going to be for our border. We're going to take our piping tip. Into our piping bag, make sure it's all the way down. We have our handy little helper here, our cup, hold our piping bag. And now we can fill it with our frosting. So we're going to take some more of our pink. Put it right in our piping bag. Lift up the sides. Start to pull our frosting down. Again, another one of these handy ties. So many in the pack. And we're just going to tie it off. Perfect. And for the perfect score, and we are ready to go. So we're going to take our piping bag, and with the shell border, we're going to be making little cheese shells. So we're going to push on our piping bag and stop. And that makes one shell. And then we're going to go right up behind it and press on our piping bag and pull back again. And we want them to touch, want them to be one right on the next one.
And can you remind us that tip, which way it should be again?
So our piping tip is going to be right up under our last shell. And we're going to push on our piping bag and then pull away.
That's a small star.
Yep, and this is the small star. So that way it is one shell right after the other. And it looks like they're falling behind each other. And you just pull off at the end of each one.
And the stars, they have different ones that have more little tongues and less. And this one has kind of medium amount, right?
Yes, so this one that we use for our cupcake is the one that has a little bit more on them. And this is actually called a French star tip.
Oh, okay.
And then this one is just a regular star tip.
Gotcha. Cool.
Awesome. Now, our last border is the same as our first one, same technique, except for we use a small open circle. So just like with our cupcake, that was the open circle compared to our French star tip. Same thing with our border. You can do one that has the star tip, or you can do one that just has the open circle. Alrighty. So the last thing is to make sure that you have as much covered on your cake as possible. So you want to do a bottom border, a top border, maybe adding some flowers, really whatever kind of decoration you want. Usually what I do is I kind of make a game plan of what I want to do before I start. So just get a sheet of paper, kind of draw your little outline of a cake, and then kind of just make a little notes of what you want to do. You want to do a shell border here, maybe a ruffle on the side, maybe a flower or two on the top. Now we have a guide to start with before you get started on your cake. But other than that, it's all about practice, practice, practice. And with your template here, you get to do that over and over again. So on the very top of our template, we have a piece of plastic wrap. And you can do one of two things. You can take the plastic wrap off, or we can use a little knife, scrape it off, and we can go back and we can practice again. So that way, if we don't get it right the first time, we can try again. And after some time, you would definitely get the hang of it.
So pretty.
Perfect.
Love it.
And we're gonna put all of our piping bags in our little holder for us, so that way they stay nice and together. And we are all set. So, kind of recap of what we went over today. We made our American Buttercream, where we use butter, powdered sugar, and a little bit of heavy cream, just to get a nice smooth texture, making sure that we don't increase the speed of our mixer too fast, so that way our powdered sugar doesn't go everywhere. We don't want a big mess. Then talking about our colors. So the difference between using our liquid colors and our gel colors. Gel is definitely going to be preferred, but your liquid colors can be used too, and they're a little bit more commonly found in the grocery store. Just want to make sure you don't use too much of them, so that way it doesn't thin out your buttercream. And then piping bags, making sure you buy the right size. Smaller projects, maybe about a 12 or 16-inch piping bag. Larger projects, anything above that would be great. Filling your piping bags, make sure you have a handy dandy helper, a nice cup or a mason jar. And buying these little ties are very, very useful for the smaller piping bags. It really helps make sure none of your frosting comes out. It's really great. And then making sure you practice that constant pressure on your piping bag for when you're piping, and then you're going to be a nice pro at all of your different decorating techniques. So we have our rose with our accent flowers, we have our French star tip, our open circle, and of course our beautiful collage of piping tips. And then when you're larger cakes, practicing those borders. The more you practice, the better you're going to be in the long run. So making you a nice template, starting off with a few different designs, and you can always look on Pinterest, maybe Facebook, Instagram, and see and get some ideas of different ideas that are out there in the industry that people are working on. And then the last thing, make sure you always enjoy. Eat your cupcakes or share them with some friends and have a wonderful day. Now, before we go, I always want to make sure that we leave you with a Flower Power goodbye. And as always, I'm Stanley here at Flower Power in Charlotte, North Carolina. And make sure you check out any of our upcoming classes on our website.